I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're talking about the Marshalltown Police and Community Team, MPACT, law enforcement and human service professionals working to build safer communities. This partnership is creating hope for people with mental health, family conflict, substance abuse, or behavioral problems when the police are called to action, providing a compassionate safety net. Joining us today are Marshalltown Police Chief Michael Tupper and Director of Community Engagement for YSS Youth Standing Strong, David Hicks. Welcome to Surviving Bad, starting with you, Chief Tupper. Tell us a little bit about why we're here today and how this partnership came to be.
Okay, thanks for having us on today. I really appreciate it. So I have had the great opportunity to serve in law enforcement for almost 30 years now, and the last 11 years as the police chief in Marshalltown. And in 2020, there were a lot of discussions going on across our country about law enforcement, how we can improve law enforcement services, lots of really important discussions in our communities about diversity and inclusion and making sure that we're providing people with the help that they need when they need it, the appropriate help that they need. And one of the things that we talked about in Marshalltown was the need to provide more crisis services and social services in our community. Our police department responds to around 850 calls for service a week. And I think most people would be surprised to know that I would guesstimate about 65% of those calls, maybe more, depending on the week, really have nothing to do with law enforcement, and they involve social service needs. And I wanted to make sure that we were providing a quality service for our community. And quite frankly, we're asking police officers to do too much. We give our police officers a lot of training in how to deal with mental health and crisis services, but they're not mental health professionals. And these are complex problems that require a multidisciplinary approach. And I just felt like we could do better. So I approached my friend David Hicks at YSS here in Marshalltown in the summer of 2020, and we had a discussion about social workers. So at the time, we were thinking about hiring one social worker that would be a city employee, work in the police department, and help us deal with some of these crisis calls. David, being the really smart guy that he is, talked to me about how we might be able to stretch our dollar further and get a better bang for our buck if we contracted with a social service agency. And to David's credit, he was not pushing YSS services, but we were just talking from a big picture perspective of what it might look like. And long story short, I knew that YSS was the best partner for us. We have a long-standing relationship with YSS here in Marshalltown, a working relationship. And I was previously a police chief in Nevada, Iowa, which is right outside of Ames. So I already had a working relationship with YSS before I even came to Marshalltown. So my relationship with YSS is almost 18 years strong. So I just knew that YSS was the best partner for us. And what we wanted to do is put together a pilot project, a 12-month pilot project, where we would have social workers, crisis workers working in the police department, embed them into the police department. And they would go out with police officers and help us deal with crisis calls, social service needs calls. And we weren't really sure how we were going to fund it. So we went to our city council here in Marshalltown in September of 2020 with a request for $25,000. And I told David before the meeting, if we get 15, we'll feel really good, because I know how it is in government work. And I just knew we were asking for a lot of money. We had about a 30-minute presentation for the city council. David did a great job of selling what we were trying to do. And they asked us, well, how much will it cost to do a full year, a 12-month pilot project for this program? And we said $150,000. And we were asking for 25. We were going to fundraise the rest or write some grants. And they gave us $150,000 because they believed in the program. And they knew that this was important and something that was necessary in our communities. So that's kind of how we got started with the Marshalltown Police and Community Team. And we shortened that down to IMPACT. And it's really had a positive impact on our community. And I'm just very proud to be able to work with David and his great team at YSS.
Well, we're going to take a short break. We come back, we're going to hear David's side of the story and learn a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this innovative program. Stay tuned. We'll see you all after the break.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzzed and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Marshalltown Police Chief Michael Tupper and David Hicks from YSS about the MPACT program. And to make a little play on words, David, tell us what the impact of MPACT is in Marshalltown.
Yeah, MPACT is the Marshalltown Police and Community Team, which is kind of a unique partnership between YSS of Marshall County and the Marshalltown Police Department, where we have embedded 2 of our social workers, or who we refer to as community advocates, within that police department to help them help law enforcement community work with those cases that are non-criminal social service-based calls. As we've learned through the startup of MPACT, a lot of the calls the police are dealing with have nothing to do with law enforcement or the criminal element. A lot of mental health calls, substance abuse calls, family conflict calls, just a wide variety of calls that maybe the police aren't the best group to handle some of those situations. And as Chief has alluded in the past, the police are just asked to do so many things these days, and they can't be, the final answer for everything. So MPACT, Marshalltown Police and Community Team, is a really unique collaborative process between the PD of Marshall County and YSS.
And what are some of the specific calls, and sort of a range of calls where people, when they feel like they have no place else to go but to the police department, what are some of these issues that people are dealing with that should lead them to contact you?
Sure. With the mental health situation, sometimes there's just not enough resources, especially if it's 11 at night and there's a mental health issue, family conflict concern. Ultimately, like I said, the police are asked to do so many things. So obviously they're going to call the police department. Police show up, try to do their best to resolve the issue. And in the past, sometimes they would give them a business card or say, call this agency or call this person. MPACT comes in after that initial call, does a little consultation with the police department, and then starts to work with that family right there at that time. So if it's a mental health issue, we can start working with them on building up supports, or maybe just talking through a situation, or gathering more information to determine, can we help this by bringing them into the office to do some therapy? Do they need to be referred out to a specialist? Is it a medication management issue? So all those dynamics come into play when we start working with those families. And when we started to put this together, there was really no framework of what this is going to look like, because it's unique to Marshalltown, unique to Iowa. So we did some early research with the police department. What types of calls you're getting? When are those calls coming in? Those non-criminal mental health related calls. So we wanted to build our program and our response to really best assist the community of Marshalltown based on the data that already existed. So the PD obviously had Friday nights as a significant call volume of mental health issues, substance abuse, conflict. So we had 2 of our advocates working Friday nights to just deal with the volume of calls. But as we've rolled out MPACT now a year and a half, mental health calls that we're responding to, that's well over half of the calls that MPACT is going out on are those mental health calls. So while mental health may be the primary response we're going out to a family to visit with them, secondary responses are there's some poverty issues. They are facing homelessness. They have more month than money, or there's a substance abuse concern. There's kind of a dual diagnosis issue, or maybe there's a family conflict, and the conflict is stemming from somebody's mental health issue. So as we've worked with families, we've recorded primary reason for calls and secondary reason of calls, and mental health is the most predominant reason we're responding to these calls. So our goals have always been to, provide support and assistance at the right time. We want to keep people out of the criminal justice system. You can't arrest your way out of these issues. And if somebody's reporting to police as a homeless issue, the police don't have a bevy of resources to work with. They have to do some case management too. So we take that burden off as well. Try and prevent people from going to the ER. So really a preventative measure has really been the key for impact success.
Now, question, do most of these calls originate through the police department?
Correct. So it's funded by the city. 911 call comes into the communication center. They assess it as they normally would. Police respond as they normally would, because they're going to make sure the scene is safe, just like they would for any second responder. So paramedics, fire department, the police are going to arrive, assess what's going on, make sure it's safe. They will radio back to our community advocate who is on duty. We will respond in our kind of nondescript mobile crisis vehicle. We'll staff that case, maybe right there on their doorstep or in their living room. And our goal is to have the police go back into the field so they can go back to the law enforcement side of thing. And so then our advocates can stay there and work with the family. So that collaboration up front is really, really key.
So I know it's traumatic for somebody to pick up the phone and dial the police. And oftentimes that call is too late, because that the trauma that you might have been able to intervene on has now manifested in some form of violence or something that may then need to involve the police more. How do you get over that stigma to get people to feel comfortable calling the police department a little sooner, a little earlier, so these interventions go into play way before bad things happen?
Yeah, and I think we've kind of adjusted to that on the fly. Now that we've been doing Impact, we've realized the importance of case management. So while we may be there at 11 o'clock at night, we're going to come back maybe the following day or 2 days later to see how that situation has worked. So we're going to prevent those future calls from coming by doing a case plan, some crisis work with that family to say, instead of calling the police the next time you're feeling really anxious or there's an outburst, here's some other supports you can utilize. And maybe it's a family member, a neighbor, maybe it's YSS, another agency. So I think it starts with every contact we make. We're already planning on how will you respond to this next time, because calling the police isn't a solution. Because it's going to go right back to Impact. So we've kind of blazed a trail of learning that case management really is going to prevent calls in the future, but also provide services and some of that accountability down the road.
We're going to take a short break, and after that, we're going to continue our conversation about the helping hands that can connect people with what they need as an alternative to law enforcement intervention. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? I'm high. Oh.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with Chief Tupper and David Hicks about alternatives to law enforcement intervention, providing people with help in situations that would be more compassionate than direct police action. But there is a lot of police action here. maybe not like the arresting kind we think about. And community buy-in's important, and it's been very successful in Marshalltown. Chief Tupper, can you share with us how this has worked out?
Well, I think, we were talking about trying to get people to call for these services and knock down some barriers that maybe keep people from calling. I think it's also important to point out that oftentimes in communities, calling 911 is the only option, especially if we're talking about after normal business hours or on the weekends or on a holiday. And so people are frequently calling the police department for issues that are really not related to law enforcement, but they're desperately seeking help. And our law enforcement officers go out and do the best they can, but we needed help. We needed a different approach. And so Impact has just made sense for us because we're able to provide people with the services that they need in a timely manner. So before Impact, we might respond to a crisis call or a social service need, and we would do our best to de-escalate the situation and triage the problem and try to calm it down so that we don't have to get called back later. And we would hand out business cards and we would say, call this service on Monday or call this resource tomorrow morning. And oftentimes people weren't doing that. We would get called back because they weren't seeking the services that we recommended. And we needed case management. That's really what we needed. Our police officers didn't have time to spend hours at these calls oftentimes, or come back the next day and try to make sure that people are following through with the recommended advice. And folks, when folks are in the middle of a crisis, they just need help. They need immediate help. And too often we were trying to hand out business cards and push off the solution to the next day, or maybe it's Friday night and they can't seek services until Monday, and it wasn't working. And we are trying to keep people out of the criminal justice system. We're trying to keep people from going to the emergency room unnecessarily. But most importantly, we're just trying to make sure that people receive the services that they need in a timely manner so they don't have to call 911 and they don't have to, the situation doesn't spiral out of control where now it does become a law enforcement issue. We need to prevent people from going in the criminal justice system, and Impact has really helped us to do that. And so I was worried about, hey, how are the cops going to accept this? I often joke, I tell David, cops hate two things. They hate the way things are, and they hate change. And so we're kind of stuck with a difficult problem. But our police officers have embraced this program because they see that it's providing the services that our community needs, and it's helping them do their job. It's making their job easier. And, David, maybe you have some stories you can share about how it's worked out.
Yeah, the very first Impact call we had was a 15-year-old girl having a conflict with her mom. 15-year-old got upset. I think they're having some ongoing conflicts. 15-year-old took off. It was early evening. Mom had no other resources but to call the police and say, my daughter ran away. We had a fight. So police found the young woman. Perfect example of how Impact can come in, start working with the family, kind of affirm what's going on in the home, and start to get them engaged in some services. Because, police can, do the best they can, but you just never know if maybe the girl would have been put into shelter, other services would have been starting. But we were able to sit with the gal, take her back home, start to work with her and her mom on the issues that are going on to prevent those future calls to law enforcement. So we were able to get them to other services as well. The young girl's doing great. She's more engaged in school, and she often looks back to say, it was for her the right services at the right time, not meant as a punishment, but just things going on at the home that were just not working. We've worked with senior citizens, and when we started Impact, we were thinking this is probably some families with kids. A senior citizen was tricked out of her life savings. It was bilked out of a scam phone call. She reports that to the police, but she's sitting there in the police department in tears, not sure how she's going to pay rent, not sure how she's going to get groceries. And now we got a criminal element with the money being gone, but we have just day-to-day issues now of how is she going to survive, what is she going to do, and how scared she was. So just working with different populations. Homeless veterans, like most communities, Marshalltown has a homeless issue, and they often remain hidden. So this homeless veteran was just sleeping outside of a bar every night. Bar owner would call the police. Police would have to just deal with this homeless individual. We came along, were able to work with the shelter to get him housed, but also connect him with Veterans Administration, other supports just for the veteran community. And now that gentleman has got his own apartment. So we've resolved that issue. We have a lot of family conflict between parent and child, as I indicated earlier. And sometimes parents get so exhausted dealing with their kid that they often say, "Oh, I'm going to call the police." I don't know any magic speech that the police have coming into a family conflict that's going to make everything okay the next day. So oftentimes there's deep-rooted concerns with substance abuse in the home, mental health in the home, maybe just a need for that family to be heard, and really right services at the right place at time. And while Impact isn't completely 24 hours right now, we are doing 10, sometimes 12 hours a day. We see the need for expansion because issues happen 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., all across the time.
Chief Tupper, one quick question before we go to break. Can people call the PD and say, "I need help from Impact"?
Yeah, they can, and they do. And we're still going to send a police officer out to triage that problem, but we'll get Impact involved right away.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a short break, and afterwards we're going to ask Chief Tupper and David Hicks to share some final comments, insights, and inspirations. You don't want to miss this.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared, and you can be certain we'll keep your world connected. Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening, our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and Mediacom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about the Marshalltown Police and Community Team, Impact, law enforcement, and human service professionals working to build a safer community. Let's see what insights, advice, and inspiration David Hicks and Chief Tupper have to share. David, you've got some information for us. Tell us about this success.
Yeah, when we received the funding from the city, we knew we were just kind of on the clock to see, hey, we got to continue the funding. So we started gathering some data. So as we kicked this off in February of 2021, we gathered data through December 2021. Impact responded to 350 calls, which assisted 509 people. Predominantly, mental health was the most obvious call coming in that we were responding to. So we started to break down the data even further the past 6 months. So in 2022, 6 months, we've responded to 124 calls involving 272 people. And then we started to measure that really important follow-up visits. So we've done 223 follow-ups to 400 people. So then we started to break down the data even further. And I mentioned that, one of our goals is to get law enforcement back out into the community while we dealt with some of those social service issues. So out of those 124 calls, kind of looking at my data here, 109 or 87% of the officers were able then to return to the field to deal with the criminal element, public safety. So our numbers are great, but as we kind of drill down, we are realizing we have some cost savings, time savings, and we're providing services at the right time and the right place. We've had over 92% of the calls we respond to, the families want the services. So the numbers speak for themselves. We can talk anecdotally about the circumstances, but it's working.
That's fantastic. And Chief Tupper, you've got some insights too that other communities might be interested in.
Yeah, I think all of our communities in Iowa are facing similar problems, and these are complex social problems that require multidisciplinary approaches. And too often in the past, we've tried to handle these problems by just sending the police, and the police aren't always equipped to deal with these problems. And we show up with law enforcement solutions for a problem that requires something different. So what we've proven here in Marshalltown, and a rural community can do this. If you have the right partnerships and collaborations in your community, you can address these problems that are complex, but you can address them in a compassionate manner. And so we ask our police officers every day to serve with passion and compassion. And this program has allowed them to do that. And it's been a great resource for our community.
Now, one thing that's often lost in these conversations is the fact that public safety officers and human service professionals, they often live in these communities. So they have a strong shared and vested interest in the outcome. Now, if for other people from other communities listening to this, Chief Tupper, what do you think that the average teacher, a parent, or somebody could do to help put this on the radar of their local law enforcement agency?
Well, talk to the local police chief or sheriff. Bring up this idea. Talk to them about possible solutions. Go to your school superintendent. Go to your city council meetings. Talk to your mayor. I think it's important for the community to be engaged with the policing that goes on in their community. And that's really how this program was born, because we went out into the community and we started asking people, what can we do better? And this idea came to be. So I think you just have to be involved as a community member.
So is it okay if somebody needed some advice on that, if they caught a hold of you?
It absolutely is okay. And David and I have talked to people all across Iowa. I receive calls from police departments across this country about what we're doing. So we're happy to talk about it.
Thank you so very much for joining us today and sharing this really interesting story. And thank you all for watching today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org, and keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.